The year is 2011, and a man named Gary Bishop is checking into a hotel. He'd had a long drive, and he was tired, so all he wanted to do was get to his room and sleep. Gary checked in at the front desk and got his keycard for his room on the 12th floor. But when he went to go to his room, he realized that something was wrong. Gary presses the elevator button for the 12th floor and gets in when the doors open. But there isn't anyone else in the elevator. When he stepped out onto the 12th floor, as he walked, he noticed that the carpet on the floor didn't match the rest of the hotel. It was an older style, and it was brown instead of the beige that everyone else was. He saw that there were no other guests and no bellhops. In fact, the entire floor seemed to be empty. It was unlocked, and he pushed the door open. He called out for help, but no one came. He walked down the hallway to his room, which was at the end on the left. When the operator answered, he told her that he was locked in his room and needed help. Gary insisted that he was being serious, but the operator hung up on him anyway. But when she asked him for his room number, he realized that he didn't know it. Now completely alone, Gary started to scream, "Help me, please, let me out." But no one came. There was a TV on the wall. He told the operator that he was on the 12th floor, but she said that all the rooms on the 12th floor were occupied. He ripped off his clothes and threw them around the room. To this day, no one knows what happened to Gary. Some say that he imagined the whole thing, but others say that the hotel is haunted. He took off his shoes and socks and threw those at the door, too. A bed in the corner and a door to a bathroom. But that was it. There were no phones, no lamps, no pictures on the walls, no mini fridges or safe. The room looked bare and abandoned. The next morning, the sun rose, and people started to check in. When he got to his room, he tried to insert the key card into the slot, but it didn't work. But the clerk said that he had no record of Gary checking in. Gary had vanished. So he pressed the doorbell and waited, but no one answered. He couldn't see the end of it because it was too dark. There were no lights or windows. All he could see was a sliver of a door at the very end, but it looked very old, and it didn't seem like it had been used in a long time. "I don't know about you, but I'm never staying in a hotel again." He tried the key again, but this time it worked. He pushed the door open and walked in. The room was empty. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss any new videos. But then Gary noticed something strange. There was a second door across from the bathroom. He walked over and tried the handle. He expected to find a closet or maybe another room, but instead he found himself in a long, dark hallway. He called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But no one answered. Gary was scared now, so he turned and ran back to the first room. He needed to get out of there. He sprinted down the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. When he got to the original door, he looked back. The hallway was gone. The door to the bathroom was still there, but the second door across from it was gone. There was nothing but a smooth wall where the door had been. He tried the key card again, but it didn't work. Gary started to panic. How could this be happening? Was he going crazy? Finally, he found the emergency button on the phone and pressed it. He thought back to the key card, but all he remembered was that it was for the 12th floor. Gary explained what had happened, but the operator didn't believe him. She thought that he was joking around, but he wasn't. He tried to call back, but the line was dead. He kicked at the door, but it wouldn't budge. He could feel himself slowly losing his mind. Then he started to cry, falling to his knees and begging for someone to help him. But no one did. All night long, Gary cried out for help, but no one came. At the front desk, they told the clerk that he had a reservation for the night before. This is a true story. They say that if you stay in the wrong hotel room, you might get trapped forever. Thanks for watching. A college student was minding his own business one night in Chicago. He took the subway downtown after midnight because he had to study late, but he didn't know that this would be the ride of his life. It all started when the train stopped at an underground station. When the doors opened, a man got on the train with a big smile. He had to study, and this was his only chance to get downtown. So he stayed on the train, but it quickly faded when he saw how few people were on the train. It was nearly empty. There were only 10 passengers in total. Did the train break through the roof of the tunnel? Was it supposed to be doing this? Then he remembered the last time he traveled on this line, there was a construction zone right above it. Could the train have gone above ground, and the windows should show the sky, not the ocean? If the train went above ground, then the windows should show buildings, not stars. So the train was definitely still in a tunnel. When he woke up, he found himself on a bench. Groaning, he slowly opened his eyes and gasped. After passing a few stations, all the passengers suddenly vanished. The windows were gone, and he was in a small room with 4 walls. He noticed a clock on the wall that read 7:30 a.m. 7 hours had passed since he boarded the train. He tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. He started to panic, and he remembered everything that happened on the train. He looked around and realized that all the seats were empty except for his. He could still see people outside the window walking on the platform, so he knew that they hadn't gotten off at any stop. He stepped out and looked around. For a moment, he thought about getting off at the next stop, but he decided against it. Then he noticed a small hole in the corner. He still had no answers, but he had to get home before his parents started to worry. He walked over and put his hand through it. Was this some kind of prank? Then something weird happened. To this day, he still doesn't know what happened on that subway train. He couldn't believe his eyes. All the other passengers' shoes were also missing. How could the windows show an ocean when they were in a tunnel? And the windows showed stars? At first he was scared, but then he became curious. What was going on? Where were all the passengers going? If you want to hear more scary stories, stay tuned. As the train continued, he noticed that the windows no longer showed tunnels or even the inside of the train. They showed endless oceans. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the train into darkness. Then he heard a loud crash. He was so confused. But if it did, why didn't anyone stop it? And where were all the passengers going? He tried to calm himself down and think rationally. If the train really did break through the roof, and if it was in a tunnel, then why were the windows showing him everything but the tunnel? He screamed, fell to the ground, and passed out. He was in a completely different place. He quickly got up and ran to the door, but it was locked. What happened on that train? Why did the passengers vanish? Where was he now? Was he trapped? He calmed down and started to look around the room. He tried the door again, but it was still locked. To his surprise, it was a doorknob on the other side. He turned it and pushed the door open. He was in a subway station, but it wasn't the one he got off at. He was 7 hours away from home. But how did he get there? And what happened on that train? He started walking towards the exit, but then he noticed something strange. He was barefoot. Where were his shoes? When he checked the rest of the train, he found them. He got on the next train home, but he couldn't stop thinking about the previous night. All he knows is that he's lucky to be alive. Texas is arguably one of the best states to live in for many reasons. It has some of the best food, the best weather, and some of the friendliest people. This was when they found a crawl space behind a wall in their home. And inside they found an old antique doll that was wrapped in newspaper from 1943. Along with the doll, they also found a note that said, "Do not move her." But in this one, it was completely different. They figured that if there was something bad associated with the doll, then moving her somewhere else would only make it worse. So they took the doll and went to the nearest dumpster and threw her away. They said that they couldn't do anything unless they had proof that the doll had been moved. So they went back to the crawl space to see if there was anything else that could help them prove that the doll had been moved. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find anything. They felt bad for the doll, but they had no other choice. They placed the doll in the crawl space and closed the door. The next morning, they woke up and checked the foot of their bed just in case. And to their surprise, the doll was sitting there once again. In the crawl space, they found an old trunk that was covered in cobwebs. They carefully lifted up the trunk and opened it. But then other days, they wonder if the doll is real. And before you go, make sure to stay tuned for more videos like these. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. If you think this story is scary, stay tuned until the end to hear another scary story. She noticed something sitting at the foot of the bed. She rubbed her eyes and thought that maybe if she went back to sleep, whatever it was would magically disappear. But when she woke up again, it was still there. When Jesse woke up, he had no idea what she was talking about. He thought that she was crazy. He told her to get out of bed and go take a look. At first, Jesse didn't believe her, but when he saw the doll, his face turned white as a sheet. They had no idea what to do. Inside was a bunch of old newspapers from the 1940s. There was also an old doll laying on top of the newspapers. The doll was wrapped tightly in the newspaper, so Jesse and Mary carefully unwrapped her. As they were taking the newspaper off, they noticed something written on it. It said, "Do not move her, or else." They were a little creeped out, but also very intrigued. They didn't know what to do. They didn't think much of it, and just assumed that whoever had lived there before them must have just been a bit strange. So they went ahead and threw the doll away. But today we'll be taking a look at why you should never move an antique doll from a crawl space. This continued on for weeks, and they were starting to get pretty scared. The couple had no idea what to do, and so eventually they contacted the local police for help. Our next story is about a young married couple from Texas who decided to renovate their home. But every morning after, they would find the doll at the foot of their bed. Now, if you're wondering who these two are, let me catch you up. These two lovebirds are named Jesse and Mary. They're a young married couple who recently bought an old house in Texas. They had always dreamed of having an old house. So when they saw this one come up on Zillow, they jumped on it. It looked like the perfect home for them. It had a big backyard where they could have a bonfire and enough rooms for them to turn into an office. After they got the keys to the new house, they started to walk around and see all the things that needed to be fixed. To their surprise, there were a lot more repairs needed than they were expecting. And as they walked through the house, they kept finding more and more things. One of these things was a crawl space behind the TV unit in the living room. As you can imagine, they were both very excited to find this because, in most houses, the crawl spaces don't really have anything interesting. After thinking about it for a while, they decided to throw the doll away. The next morning, Mary woke up first, and to her surprise, they called the police. But the police didn't seem to believe them either. After a while, they gave up and went back home. But this time, they brought the doll with them. To this day, they have no idea what happened to the doll. Some days, they think that maybe it was just a dream. What would you do if you found a creepy doll in your house? Let us know in the comments below. Hey, you ever look in the mirror and your reflection doesn't do what you think it should? That happened to a guy in Michigan. It all started when he was just shaving and his mirror image just wasn't cooperating. And while he's running, the lights are flickering and the bathroom door behind him slams shut. Now he's obviously scared at this point, right? Because what the heck is going on? Even though you can't voluntarily make yourself blink, well, according to Dr. Andrew Huberman, but if we assume it's instantaneous, and since the signal had to travel the length of the bathroom to get to his reflection and then back again, it took longer for his reflection to blink than it did for him to blink. Then technically your reflection blinked first, because it's the thing that S closer to the mirror that S receiving the signal first. Well, in that case, they'd both blink at the same time. But since your reflection is already 2 seconds behind, if you could somehow make it so that it was 1 second behind instead, then you'd both blink at the same time. Because according to Dr. Huberman, when you look in the mirror, can you manipulate time itself in order to match your blinks with your reflection? Well, unfortunately, the answer is probably no. And that's why I didn't win the Nobel Prize for figuring this out. You're seeing yourself as you were 2 seconds ago. Just remember that your moves aren't exactly what they used to be. You're slower now than you were before. Blink once, and it'll take a second for your reflection to do the same. Blink twice, and you will be fighting each other in a battle of wills that will last for 10 minutes. And by the end of it, you'll both be left feeling tired, defeated, and slightly weirded out. See, the light reflecting off your body takes time to get to the mirror and then back to your eyes. And that means that by the time you see your reflection, it's already 2 seconds old. But if we assume that the speed of light is roughly 300,000 kilometers per second, which is about 670 million miles per hour, then technically you blinked first. A tenured professor in the Department of Neurology and Neurological Sciences at Stanford Medicine, your brain can't tell the difference between a voluntary and involuntary blink. So if you were in a dark bathroom staring directly at the mirror and your reflection sends a signal to your brain that it needs to blink, you'll blink. And the reflection will blink. Your brain does send signals to make you blink when it thinks you need to, like when you're looking at something really close. But sometimes those signals get scrambled, and your brain tells you to blink when you do and want to. Like when you re-driving at night and the headlights from the car in front of you mess with your vision, but he's also trying to be scientific about it. Like, okay, maybe if I stay still, it will too. But no such luck. He even stepped back, but his reflection leaned forward, locked in a battle of wills with his own reflection, and it was only after 10 minutes that he blinked first. As soon as he did, his reflection did the same. But the question there is, who blinked first? The guy or the reflection? Well, it turns out that science actually has an answer for this. So then he did something crazy. It's to wet, clean, and protect the eye while also helping us focus on things up close. But blinking isn't something we can control consciously. In fact, if you try to stare straight ahead without blinking, you'll probably end up with a bloody eye socket because you blinked so hard. So hard you blacked out for a second and punched yourself in the face. He ran. Now, most people would say, I'm not even going to try and keep up with that. But this guy, he wanted answers. And for 10 whole minutes, he stayed in that bathroom. You see, there's a physiological reason why we blink. But here's where things get weird. But what happens to those signals if they get sent twice? Now, we do and know exactly how long it takes for the signal to travel from your brain to your eye muscles and back again. See, the guy in the Michigan bathroom was definitely standing closer to the mirror than his reflection was. But what if they were the same distance away from the mirror? So if you blink now, your reflection won't blink until 2 seconds from now. So the real question is, but hey, if you ever find yourself in a bathroom, staring into the abyss of your own reflection, thanks for watching. Welcome to my channel. Today we will meet a woman who found a family photo that changed overnight. It was an ordinary day for this woman when she decided to sort through some old family photos. Her mother had passed away a few years prior and she was now going through her things. The woman found a photo of her, her brother, her parents, and a few other relatives. The woman couldn't understand why her brother was in the photo. She felt as if she was going crazy. She went through her brother's things and found an old camera. It was the same camera that was used to take the picture. Some people thought that the photo was fake, while others believed that it was real. The woman didn't know what to think. She was confused and scared. But one thing was certain, the photo was real, and it changed her life forever. She took the camera to a repair shop and asked them to develop the film. When the photos were ready, she looked through them and saw the same picture of her and her family. But this time it was clear who was standing next to her. It was her cousin, not her brother. The woman was shocked. How could she have mistaken her cousin for her brother? She looked at the photo again and saw something that made her gasp. In the background there was a man who looked exactly like her brother. He was smiling and waving at the camera. The woman couldn't believe what she was seeing. Was it really her brother? She couldn't sleep or eat properly. They couldn't believe that the man in the photo was the woman's brother. They felt as if they had been living a nightmare. But there was no denying the evidence. The man in the photo was the woman's brother. He was really alive. All she could think about was the photo and what it meant. Was it a miracle? Was her brother still alive? Or was there another explanation? If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching. See you next time. They were all smiling and having the time of their lives. The woman smiled as she looked at the photo, but that smile quickly faded from her face. She didn't remember taking that picture. She took a closer look and realized that it wasn't even her brother standing next to her. It was someone else. But how could this be? Her brother had passed away a week before this picture was taken. The woman couldn't believe her eyes. She carefully examined the photo, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Who was that person standing next to her? He was always the center of attention, and his absence was deeply felt by everyone. The family gathered together to look at the photo and try to figure out what was going on. No one had any answers. They were all scratching their heads, trying to come up with a logical explanation for what they were seeing. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't think of anything. Why did he look so much like her brother? The woman couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. She showed the photo to her father, who was deeply saddened by the discovery. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I thought that was your brother," he said, pointing at the man in the picture. "But he died a week ago." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe that her brother was in the photo. She felt as if she had been ripped apart by the sudden realization. The woman's brother had been a happy-go-lucky guy who loved spending time with his family. Days turned into weeks, and the photo became a mystery that the family couldn't solve. One day, the woman decided to take matters into her own hands. The woman showed the photo to the rest of her family, and they were all shocked. After the woman shared her story online, she received thousands of comments and messages. So what do you think? Is the photo real or fake? Let me know in the comments below. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at two stories with the same title. Everything's been done before. The story is called The Man at the Window, 2 Stories Up. Here's the story. There's a quote that I really like that says, "Great minds think alike." And there's this other one that says, "This one was written by user Sean Musha," and it was also posted on Reddit's or No Sleep subreddit. I was awoken in the middle of the night by what sounded like heavy breathing in my bedroom. I lived on the 2nd floor. If you like scary stories, make sure you check out my podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a great day and be nice to each other. And the only way to access the 2nd floor was through an exterior staircase on the side of the house. My bedroom window was on the side of the house, and it was 2 stories up. I remember laying in bed trying to convince myself that it was just my dog, which was downstairs. I tried to go back to sleep, but the breathing became louder. Then I started to hear what sounded like footsteps on the roof. I got out of bed and walked over to the window. I opened the curtains and looked out. In the distance, I could see what looked like a pair of headlights from a car. But what caught my attention was what appeared to be a dark figure standing on my roof directly in front of my window. I remember thinking, how is someone up there? If someone wanted to get onto my roof, they'd have to go up a ladder because there's no stairway. It's 2 stories up. I shut the blinds and tried to go back to sleep, but the breathing and the footsteps continued. About 15 minutes later, I was awoken again, this time by what sounded like heavy footsteps on the floorboards directly above my head. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. I got out of bed and cautiously walked over to my window. I opened the curtains and looked out. There was still a dark figure standing on my roof, but now it was much closer to my window. The figure looked like a man wearing what looked like coveralls or some type of uniform. I remember vividly thinking, what is this guy doing? How is he up there? I slammed the blinds shut and called out for my dog. Started to hear the breathing again, but it was coming from inside my bedroom. Started to panic and ran out of the room to call 911. When I returned to my bedroom, I noticed that the window was slightly open. I had always kept the window closed at night because of the latch. I remembered distinctly thinking, how is this possible? I cut in to remember exactly what happened after that, because I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. At the hospital, the police told me that they couldn't find anyone on my roof, and that they didn't see any signs of forced entry. I have never been back to that apartment at night, and it's been 5 years. The story is called The Man at the Window, 2 Stories Up. Here's the story. If you want to steal from one author, it's never a good idea to steal from 2. So when I saw these 2 stories with the exact same title, my first thought was, oh wow, great minds think alike. But then my second thought was, wait a minute, if they both stole from the same person, who was that person? So let's take a look. They say nothing in life is original. The first story was written by a user named KL, and it was posted on Reddit's No Sleep subreddit. I've always been a light sleeper, which is annoying when you live in a busy city. It's quite common for me to wake up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. Most times I just go back to sleep without any issues. But every now and then, I'll wake up and something will be just outside my window. For the past few months, I've been living in an apartment in Seattle. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor and has a large picture window that overlooks the parking lot in front of our apartment complex. My apartment has blinds, but I prefer to leave them open at night because I like being able to see what's out my window. I've gotten used to hearing sirens, people yelling, cars honking, and other assorted noises that come with living in a big city. But about 3 months ago, I started hearing what sounded like heavy footsteps on the roof of our apartment complex. I live on the 2nd floor, and the only way to get onto the roof is through a locked door near the stairs. I mentioned the footsteps to my roommate, but he said that he hadn't heard anything and to just ignore it. I tried to do that, but every night I would hear the footsteps directly above my bed. They sounded like someone walking back and forth on the roof. I tried my best to ignore it, but some nights I would wake up and I'd hear the footsteps right outside my window. I still assumed that it was just some guy walking around on the roof, even though I knew that wasn't possible. One night I was awoken in the middle of the night by what sounded like heavy breathing. I opened my eyes and I could see a dark figure standing directly outside my window. I immediately screamed and my roommate woke up. We both looked out the window and saw a man standing on the roof directly above our apartment. Then he disappeared. We assumed that we had somehow left the window open, so we closed it and went back to bed. But the next morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, I noticed that the window was still closed and latched shut. At night, I'm never quite sure if it's safe to leave the window open or not. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I never leave the window open more than a crack in case someone tries to crawl in. That night, I decided to leave the window open just a little bit. I figured if the man was still there, I would just scream and my roommate would protect me. Well, that night, I didn't hear any breathing, but I did hear footsteps on the roof again. I woke up again, but this time, the footsteps were coming from inside my apartment. I sat up in bed and realized that my window was open just enough for a small animal to crawl in. I started to panic. I turned on my bedroom light and looked around the room. I couldn't see anything. My heart began to race, and I could feel my breathing become very shallow. I got up and started to walk toward the window. As I approached, I could hear the breathing getting louder, and I could hear the sound of claws on the hardwood floor. I turned the window light on and looked out into the darkness. All I saw was a black cat staring at me from the fire escape. Then it jumped down and ran away. I never leave my window open at night anymore. That's the story. The Man at the Window 2 Stories Up by Kowal. Now let's look at the second story with the same title. This happened about 5 years ago. So there you have 2 stories, The Man at the Window 2 Stories Up. The Second Baby in the Crib. A Babysitter's Oregon Horror. Part 1. The Call That Changed Her Night. It was a rainy Thursday evening in Eugene, Oregon, when 17-year-old Emma Reynolds agreed to babysit for the Carter-Zan upper-middle-class diapers on the table, emergency numbers on the fridge magnet, and then she left with her husband, off to their anniversary dinner. A couple who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood lined with pine trees and porch lights, then decided to lay him in his portable bassinet downstairs. She wanted to be close in case he stirred. She had watched their 6-month-old baby boy, Noah, a few times before. Easy money, she thought. Feed him, rock him to sleep, scroll through TikTok, maybe do some homework. Mrs. Carter gave her the usual rundown. Bottles in the fridge, Emma held Noah in her arms as he finished his bottle and drifted off. She rocked him for a while as the rain picked up and wind tapped at the windows. Emma settled into the couch and turned on a movie. But about 40 minutes later, the baby monitor blinked. The second infant was still on the screen. Same face. Same little button nose. Same birthmark above his eyebrow. Slowly, trying not to wake the real Noah, she climbed the stairs. Still not moving. Still staring blankly upward. Noah was still there. Still real. Still warm. Then it stabilized. The mobile was still turning. She backed out of the room, breathing hard, heart slamming. Why? What was going on? A prank? A twin? Had the Carters never told her they had 2 children? The crib's mobile slowly spun above him like someone had just touched it. The screen showed a baby lying still in the upstairs crib. Hi, sorry, this is weird, but is there another baby? Like a twin, wide awake? People saying they saw duplicates of their own kids just staring theirs. There's another baby up there. It looks just like Noah, staring straight up at the ceiling. There was another baby, I swear to God. It looked just like him. I saw it. On the monitor. In the crib. And then I saw it in real life too. Emma, Mrs. Carter said slowly. Noah's crib is in the living room. You're holding him. There's nothing in the nursery. We moved his old crib upstairs last week. It's empty. She held Noah closer, double-checked that he was breathing. Mrs. Carter looked shaken, but tried to reassure her. Maybe it was a dream, or the rain, or your phone lagging. He was. Maybe the Carters had a doll or a backup baby monitor showing an old recording. That had to be it. Peaceful, warm, his tiny hand curled on her shoulder. And one night, just once, she swore she saw her little cousin asleep in the crib on screen. And another baby behind him. The crib camera from upstairs where Noah wasn't supposed to be showed motion. Emma froze. But Noah was still asleep in her arms. Part 2. 2 babies, 1 name. Emma's heart jumped. She looked back at the baby monitor. Emma hesitated. But something inside her, it wasn't logic. It was gut instinct told her to go check. When she entered the nursery, the overhead nightlight flickered for a second. And in the crib, wrapped in the same blue blanket Noah had been wrapped in earlier, was another baby. He was awake, just silently staring. Emma took a shaky step back. Then he blinked. Slowly, like he knew she was there. Part 3. The baby that shouldn't be Emma nearly dropped the real Noah. She rushed back downstairs. She called Mrs. Carter immediately. The line crackled. Another baby? What are you talking about? In the crib upstairs, Emma whispered. The silence on the line was chilling. Emma's mouth went dry. I'm coming home, Mrs. Carter said quickly. Don't go back up there. Don't touch anything. Part 4. Something was still watching. Emma stayed downstairs with Noah. The baby monitor now showed static. The image of the second baby had vanished. The storm outside got louder. The lights flickered again. She called her best friend Zoe, just to stay sane. Emma, Zoe whispered, do you remember that Reddit thread a few months ago? What about the changeling babies? Emma tried to laugh it off, but it came out hollow. I thought that was fake. Everyone thought it was fake. Until the parents started disappearing, Emma glanced at the staircase. It was dead silent. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still up there, watching, waiting. Part 5. The crib was empty. But not really. The Carters came home in under 15 minutes. Mr. Carter grabbed a flashlight and ran upstairs. The crib was empty. Emma couldn't explain it. She knew what she saw. But Emma saw the way she kept looking at the monitor, like she expected something else to appear. Emma never babysat for them again. 3 weeks later, the Carters sold the house and moved to Arizona. But sometimes when Emma can't sleep, she still checks her own baby monitor just in case. Staring, waiting, identical. The nurse walked into the hospital and immediately knew something was wrong. All of the nurses and doctors' stations were empty. Months ago, she had worked the night shift in the pediatric cardiology wing. She looked around the empty hospital and saw a note on the desk that said, change all of the patients in the post-op pediatric ward to the pediatric cardiology ward. Below that note was another one that said, please hurry. Are you here to take care of us? Oh, she lied again and said, I'll go check. She clocked in and asked her boss about the incident. He looked pale and shaken. What incident? He asked. You mean the pediatric cardiology wing? Yeah, she replied. Were they real? Why did they disappear? The nurse still doesn't have the answers to those questions. She quit the next day. Maybe it was all a dream. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe. Some places are better left unexplored. That wing has been condemned and closed off for years. No one has worked there or been admitted there since 2008. And as far as I know, no one has ever died there either. How did you end up there last night? Shh. She walked out of the room and immediately called the police. In fact, you didn't work at all last night. You were never even at the hospital. The nurse was stunned. She thought she had gone crazy. Maybe she really did go crazy last night. But no, she remembered everything clearly. She had moved 24 patients from that ward to the post-op pediatric ward. Then she went to the supply closet, and then those kids were in the beds. She knew that much was real, at least. She told them about the 24 unidentified children that were in the hospital. The police arrived quickly, but when they entered the ward, the beds were empty. The nurse bent down to her level and lied, of course. I'm your new nurse. What are your names? The little girl with the pigtails responded, my name is Mary, and this is my sister, Sarah. The nurse smiled and said, it's nice to meet both of you. Do you need anything? They shook their heads. No, we just want to go home, Mary said. She shrugged and grabbed a list of names of the patients that needed to be moved. She went to the elevator and rode it up to the pediatric cardiology floor. She had just finished her shift in the post-op pediatric ward. When she clocked out, she had just moved 24 patients from this very same ward to the post-op pediatric ward less than an hour ago. Where did they all come from? Confused, she checked their IDs and found that none of them were real. Their birthdays were all listed as January 1st, 1900. She checked the hospital's online directory to see if any of the doctors or nurses were on their lunch break, but they were all at their desks. Her boss asked her to stay an extra hour in the post-op pediatric ward to help change all of the patients. At first she had refused because she was exhausted and it wasn't her responsibility. But then her boss reminded her that the hospital was understaffed and pleaded with her to stay, so she agreed. It was the middle of the night, and the only sound that could be heard was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. She had been called in to work a night shift in the pediatric cardiology wing, but when she clocked in, no one was there. She saw the note. It read, please do not enter. "This floor is closed for cleaning." She frowned and looked around. The room that she was in was a supply closet. She opened the door and walked out onto the empty ward. There were 24 beds on the ward, and every single one of them had a patient in it. The patients were also nowhere to be seen. She was a travel nurse from New York who had been working at the same hospital for 3 months. And now, here she was. As soon as she stepped out of the elevator, she couldn't believe her eyes. As she was checking their IDs, one of the patients, a little girl with pigtails, got out of bed and asked. The nurse knew that wasn't possible since the hospital had no record of them being admitted. The next morning, the nurse came back to work to find out what had happened. She explained that she was called in to work a night shift there, but he interrupted her. That never happened. You were never called in, so who were those children? A man who had no shadow. It was a hot summer day in Arizona. A long-haul trucker was driving his rig down the highway. The sun was beating down as the man climbed into the cab. The trucker couldn't help but notice how still he was, how he seemed almost frozen. But the man was clearly tired from his long walk, so the trucker figured it was just exhaustion making him sit stiffly, making the air shimmer with heat. He sat in the passenger seat staring out the window with an unreadable expression on his face. Just when the trucker was about to give up hope, the footprints led him to a car. A 1969 Dodge Charger, its paint job faded and peeling. The car was old, very old, and it looked like it had been abandoned for years. But something about it made the trucker uneasy. It was then that he felt it, a sudden, inexplicable jolt of fear that made him pull his hand back. He didn't want to touch the car, didn't want to get any closer. He noticed a pair of footprints in the gravel by the truck. They were unlike any footprints he'd ever seen, and then he saw it, a faint outline of a man sitting in the driver's seat as if he'd been sitting there for decades. What if he was something else, something dangerous? The trucker's blood ran cold. Was this the man's car? A chilling reminder of the strange and eerie things that can happen on the open road. Had he been following him, as if they'd been made by someone who wasn't quite human? The only sound that broke the silence was the low rumble of the engine and the occasional chirp of a passing bird. He told them about the car, about the hitchhiker, and about the strange footprints. The operator sounded skeptical, but the trucker could hear the urgency in his own voice. The door was open, but there was no sign of the hitchhiker anywhere. The trucker looked around frantically, his heart pounding in his chest. Where had the man gone? How could he have vanished into thin air? The car was old, and the gas had long evaporated, but the footprints were still there, imprinted in the gravel like a pair of ghostly visitors. Suddenly he saw a man walking along the highway, his thumb out, hitchhiking. The trucker pulled over to the side of the road and asked the man if he wanted a ride. The man looked up at the trucker. His eyes were sunken and deep set, and he had a scraggly beard that hadn't seen a shave in days. "Sure, I could use a ride," the man said in a voice that sounded like sandpaper on wood. The trucker climbed back into his cab and motioned for the man to get in. The man didn't say much throughout their ride. As they drove, the trucker glanced at the man in the passenger seat. That's when he noticed something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The man had no shadow. The trucker's blood ran cold, slammed on the brakes and turned the wheel, sending the truck veering off the road and into a nearby gas station. He jumped out of the truck and rushed to the passenger side, but the man was gone. He searched the gas station, the convenience store, and even the truck stop, but the man was nowhere to be found. The trucker followed the footprints, his every sense on high alert. He walked slowly, cautiously around the car, looking for any sign of the hitchhiker. He walked slowly toward the car and reached out a hand to touch the door. With trembling hands, the trucker dialed 911. When the operator answered, as the minutes ticked by, the fear in the trucker's chest grew. What if the hitchhiker wasn't just a hitchhiker? When the police finally arrived, they found the car, but there was no sign of the hitchhiker or the driver. And so the mystery of the hitchhiker with no shadow remained unsolved.
Hey there, everyone! Welcome back to the channel! Have you ever heard of anything strange while hiking? If so, feel free to share your experience below. Now, let's get into today's scary story about a forest hiker who met himself. The Appalachian Trail stretches from Georgia to Maine and is one of the longest hiking trails in the world. He made it to the end of each day without incident. But as the days passed, he began to get tired. It was late at night, and he was sleeping in his tent when he heard someone outside the tent calling for help. At first, he thought it was a dream, but then he heard the voice again, closer this time. He unzipped the tent to see a man standing outside calling for help. Once inside, the hiker tried to make sense of what was going on. He asked the man how he could possibly be him, but the man said he didn't know. After all, what could be more terrifying than meeting yourself on a lonely hike and realizing you're both lost? All he remembered was waking up in the middle of the night and seeing another version of himself. Everything seemed less scary now that he wasn't alone. But then the man did something that made the hiker's blood run cold. While the hiker was making breakfast, the man approached him and asked him to walk backward a few steps. By the time he reached Pennsylvania, he was exhausted, but he still had hundreds of miles to go before he could finish the trail. Could there really be another version of himself out there? Was this other hiker an alternate version of himself who had come to this reality from another dimension? He couldn't be sure. If you like it, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. Also, don't forget to share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Each year, thousands of people come to hike it, but the trail has a dark side. Some hikers never make it out alive. And to make matters worse, the man also had the same face and the same voice. Startled, the hiker quickly called out for help, but there was no answer. He ran after the man, but he soon realized that he had vanished. For a moment, he just stared at the man in disbelief. But as soon as he took a step back, the man's face suddenly broke into a wide smile. The hiker was taken aback by the sudden change in the man's demeanor. The hiker continued on the trail, but he never forgot that strange encounter. To this day, he still wonders if there are other versions of himself out there. And the man reached out a hand and introduced himself by the name he had given himself when he started the hike. One such person was a 24-year-old guy who was determined to finish the entire trail in one go. But then he saw something that made him gasp. The ground behind him was covered in small pebbles, but somehow the pebbles had been disturbed, as if someone had walked through them. He was fit and healthy and had spent months preparing for this hike. His friends and family were very worried about him. As the hiker looked around in disbelief, he realized that he was truly alone on the trail. Had he really just met himself? He knocked until the hiker finally got up the courage to open the zip. He unzipped the tent and asked the man what he wanted, but they knew he wouldn't listen if they tried to talk him out of it. So they just said goodbye and hoped he'd be careful. He started his hike in March 2019. At first, everything went well. Then one night, something very strange happened. Startled, the hiker quickly zipped up his tent and pretended he wasn't there. But then the man outside started knocking on the tent. But when he asked this, he noticed that the man was wearing the exact same clothes he was wearing. The hiker was confused and scared, but he invited the other man into his tent to calm down. The hiker listened to this and thought for a moment. At that point, the two hikers decided to stick together for the rest of the journey. Just then, the hiker felt a sense of relief. Confused, the hiker did as he was told. And before he could react, the man lunged at him and disappeared into the trees. The hiker was scared and confused. What had happened to the man? Had he imagined the whole thing? And then he noticed something else. The footprints were going in the opposite direction. And if so, where was that other version of himself now? Well, that's today's scary story.